So, welcome everyone. I am so delighted to get to share today with you and to get to share the incredibly talented, thoughtful, and inspiring Langston Kahn. Langston Kahn is a shamanic practitioner and teacher specializing in radical human transformation, ancestral healing, and the restoration of an authentic relationship with emotions. He stands firmly at the crossroads. His practice is informed by somatic modalities, contemporary shamanic traditions, initiations into traditions of the African diaspora, and, and his helping spirits and ancestors weaving it all together. He is the author of Deep Liberation, Shamanic Teachings for the Reclaiming Wholeness in a Culture of Trauma. Are you guys not excited about today? I'm really excited, especially today of all days of like, wow, I'm really grateful to have you in our presence. So without further ado.
Thank you so much for having me here, and thank you everyone for choosing to spend your Thursday this way. I appreciate it for you showing up. So, I usually like to start by us just forming a shared circle together, even though we're in this strange virtual space, making it a little more our own. So, let's just take a moment, if you feel comfortable doing so, to close your eyes and begin to just settle into your body. Just feel the weight of your body being supported by your chair and the earth rising up to hold you and meet you. And feel the air on your skin. And then gently turn inwards with your awareness and just take a deep breath into the center of your head, into your heart, to your belly. And take a moment now, just in your mind's eye, to feel, sense, see our circle here, all that are present here with us now, and all who might watch the recording after. Letting that circle expand so it's big enough for everyone. Feeling how we each have a place in this circle. However we are in this moment, however we're choosing to show up right now, we each have a place here, exactly as we are. And at the center of our circle, I'm calling in fire. So you might see a nice warm fire at the center of our circle. We call you in, fire, to help us this day to connect well with that fire in that belly. The fire in our bellies, the unique spark of divinity that we are here to bring in these times when there is much need of warmth and light and connection. Help us to be that fire we are in a good way. Help us to feel into what we need uniquely this day to tend that fire, that it is sustainable. Help us to connect to whatever our true longing or wanting is for being here in this day with this work. We honor you. And we call in the spirit of technology as well. You might see it as a kind of power object, however you want to imagine it. It's hovering above the fire. This young spirit that has so much possibility but needs some guidance. And so we ask you, spirit of technology, to help us to connect in a way that is kind and true and that is in service of life and that is easeful. We honor you and we thank you. And take one more moment just to feel into the spirits, the land where we are, the earth, the spirits of place, the rivers, the lakes, the forests, the mountains. And just take a moment to offer gratitude to those energies for holding us here this day. We thank you and we invite you to help us to rediscover a new relationship with our bodies and the earth that is grounded deeply in love. We honor you and we thank you. So, just choosing to be here now in this space together. And when you're ready, beginning to open your eyes and come back into our circle. So, today, my original plan, which I, planned many months ago, was to uh, talk about grounding and grounding, not just as in sort of like, hugging a tree or like going out in nature or just being present, but what does it mean to be deeply rooted in the foundation of our being, in our body, and from that place to reach down and connect into the energy and the wisdom of the earth and its dreaming in a way that we can carry that relationship as we move throughout our day, not have it just be something we do that gets compartmentalized and then we forget about as we move through the rest of our day. How do we sustain that kind of connection and intimacy with the earth in a way that's easeful and useful to us? Um, and I still am going to talk about that. And then I also want to move into after that, looking a little bit into some tools we can use to engage those inner selves that carry those inner stories Leah's told me you've been talking about that keep us out of that connection, that say it's not safe to be grounded, so uproot our grounding, or say, um, it's not safe to be seen. So maybe I can be grounded, but I have to hide when I'm grounded. All these different stories that can interfere with our ability to stay present with ourselves, with the earth, and with each other as we move through our day. I'm just going to share a few tools for engaging that deep wisdom of our body that rises up from the earth to help us come back into relationship with that living process that we are. And what I mean by that is just as the earth is a living, evolving, growing process, constantly changing in this big, vast ecosystem, so are we. And there can be moments when we feel we have to make a choice to survive, that we pull ourselves out of that living process. And a part of us sort of gets stuck making these survival choices out of fear. Um, And then when we encounter similar situations, we find ourselves making those same old choices from the past that we got stuck in those moments. Because that part of us is no longer free to be in the present moment where we have the power to create change. If there's one thing we're going to talk about today, it's really how do we come back into that present moment? Not in just like a intellectual, like be more present way, but really how do we practically speaking engage some tools to actually experience presence? So, what I'd like to say though, before we go into all of that, with obviously, I think in most of our fields right now is probably the awareness of all that's going on in the world right now in many different spheres, some that seem more urgent and present than others, some that maybe impact some of us more directly than others. And so I don't feel like it's so useful in this moment to talk in detail about those events. For me personally, though, anyone who wants to is welcome to as we move into questions and discussion. But what I want to say is this work is that we're going to be doing today is not about how to sort of escape the discomfort of the times we're in. It's more about how do we cultivate the resource and resilience we need to be present with that discomfort without collapsing into it, to feel the mess of the times we're in, and also feel the vision we're trying to cultivate for ourselves, the new story of our life that we're trying to tell, the new story we're trying to tell for our people. And hold both of those things, not collapse into the new story or collapse into the mess of the current reality, and hold them both in this structural tension place where we can actually take actions that have traction in our life. And so for me, and obviously there's lots of different things we could talk about and how to do that, but for me, the foundation of how to do that is grounding, because it's that basic level of forming a connection with an energy that's so much bigger than us, that's available to literally anyone on the earth. Because if you're here, you have a right to that connection to the earth. From a shamanic perspective, an animist perspective, the earth dreamed you here. The earth decided that you could have a body here and invested enormous amount of resources so that that body could be here and be sustained here over time. And so from my perspective, humanity isn't some parasite on the earth. Um, if you believe that the earth, in a sense, dreamed us all here, then, and I don't say you have to believe that. I just invite you to take that as a hypothesis. Then it follows that humanity is meant to be here, that we have a purpose, just as like a heart has a purpose in the organism of our body. Humanity has a purpose in the vast organism of the earth. But most indigenous cultures seem to understand that humans don't do a great job of just naturally being that energy they're meant to be here, fulfilling that purpose we're meant to fulfill as a species. That we need a lot of help. We need help from the plants. We need help from the animals. We need help from community, um, to actually remember who we are and who we can be here on this planet. And within that bigger conversation of who humanity was meant to be, there's of course the individual conversation of who are each of us meant to be. What is our individual purpose? And that's not meant to be um, like a role, like a teacher, a parent, a scientist. Those are vehicles for the expression of our purpose. The energy of our purpose itself, from a shamanic perspective, is this unique energy that has never been seen before and will never be seen again. And that the entire universe is depreciated if we don't embody it, because only we can embody it. But it's not about doing something, it's about being something and doing everything we do as that unique essence that we are, cultivating that kind of coherence. But of course, if we don't have that connection to the earth, then it's literally not safe to be who we are. It's not safe to be this big, vibrant, incredible energy that each of us are, because we need, just like a electrical system needs to be grounded into the earth so it doesn't blow out its circuits, we also need to be grounded into the earth so we feel safe to sustain the bigness and vastness that we are as we move throughout our day. And we know that we're moving in a way that's in relationship, right relationship, you might say, with the larger ecosystem that we're part of. Versus just, we can't help but be in relationship. We're always in relationship with everything, whether we like it or not. It's just a question of, is that going to be a relationship of flow and reciprocity and generosity? Or is that going to be a relationship of exploitation and extraction? There's not really a neutral. It's sort of one or the other. And so, without me talking too much more about it, I really just want to start us off pretty experientially, just diving into a grounding practice. And then we're going to talk a bit about the experience of that practice. Okay, wonderful. So, let's just settle in. Closing your eyes, finding a comfortable sitting position. I recommend that you not be lying down for this. That kind of makes it harder, actually. So, again, just take a few deep breaths. into your head, into your heart center, into your belly. Now, as you settle into that sacral area you've been spending so much time in, Leah's told me, just take a moment to open your imagination, open all your senses. Doesn't matter, I might use the word visualize, but when I say that, I mean physical sensations, emotions, colors, images, intuitive knowings, all of that is welcome. Just opening all of your senses and letting them inform each other. And so begin to find yourself in a pond in the sacral energy center in your body, just like a pond in this sort of bowl of your pelvis. You might see it as a sunny day with a lily pad there and a lotus flower. And just invite that plant spirit in of that lily pad to begin to help you learn what it means to ground. Begin to notice the roots underneath the lily pad, all those different branching forms on the underside of that big lily pad, all of them reaching down to this large, thick stem. And begin sending a little ball of your awareness down that thick stem into the cool water. And keep going down until you get into the sort of squishy muck of the rotting leaves and the fish poop and frogs' eggs and all the squishy things, rich and fertile, moving down even deeper into the dark earth beneath. Just let that plant spirit of the lily show you how easy it is to root down into the earth on the land where you are right now. Let yourself form your own cord down, guiding your energy with your mind's intention, letting it be easy. And you continue down, sending those roots down deeper until you reach the bedrock on the land where you are. And let your grounding cord root down into that bedrock. And again, just let it be easy. Don't let the mind get in the way. Plants move through stone all the time. Root into that solid foundation of the bedrock. These ancient mountain people who have seen ice ages and still maintain their essence of stability and strength and foundation. Root into that sense of stability that rises up from the earth and isn't dependent on anyone else, isn't dependent on your family or friends or community or your culture. It simply is there for you in the earth. Feel what the bedrock is showing you about your own foundation, what you live for, where you stand, what you stand for. And thank the bedrock. Begin moving down deeper, deeper still, into the earth being and all of its wisdom and intelligence, feeling that sense of what the earth is doing on the land where you are now. The way the earth is supporting transformation through slow, incremental change of the seasons, of weather, of light. Feeling how the earth supports the vast diversity of life, constantly moving towards balance, that dance of balance. And you might invite the earth in this moment to share with you. How might you better cultivate balance in your life in this moment? Or if it feels like a more interesting question, how might you sustain change in your life in this moment? The answers might come in words, they might be in symbols or images or emotions, feelings. Just let all of your senses open. And try to just describe them as they come, not trying to move into analysis, just feeling, sensing, opening. And now, thank the earth and begin to go even deeper. We're moving towards the original dream of the earth, the essence of the earth, this place of stillness and darkness and silence and solitude, all those energies that are needed for true restoration. You might see this place or sense this place, the kind of silver, luminous pool at the center of the earth. This is where your grounding cord has been seeking. So just let it anchor there. You might see it like a big tree root system. You might see it like a ship's anchor. However you need to do it, just anchor your grounding cord in this place of true restoration. And let your heart rest there for a moment. Feel how you don't have to be anything or do anything here. You don't have to perform anything. And just rest. And begin drawing up that silver energy with your breath. Up your grounding cord, up through the earth being, through the bedrock, that foundation, through your own feet and legs and hips. And pause for a moment there in your sort of root around the bowl of your pelvis and just feel the goodness of that connection. You might notice parts that feel really relieved to have this connection, other parts that might be uncomfortable with it, and they're all welcome. You don't have to push any away. They can all be here at the party. But continue as the self you are, the big self who can hold all of that, just to welcome this connection in. And feel how it's a two-way connection, that it's flowing up from the earth and then back down into the earth. And begin to draw that silver energy up into your belly, in your solar plexus, and your heart. It's the energy of repair and restoration and soothing. Just let it move wherever it's needed, like a soothing ointment. Wherever it feels tired or achy or sore, just breathing in this silver energy into your body and exhaling it back down into the earth, feeling it cycling like a fountain. Now bring it into your head and let it wash out your senses, your eyes, your ears, your mouth, the back of your head, the top of your head. All these ways of knowing, ways of receiving. Just take a few more deep breaths, even if there's a sense of, patience somewhere in you or fear. That's okay. Those feelings are welcome, but just continuing to breathe into this connection and feeling the safety in that connection. When we're not connected to the earth, we are unsafe. Feel the restoration of safety. You feel ready, beginning to settle back into the space we're in, feeling the weight of your body being supported by your chair in the earth. Opening your eyes if they're not already open. Just observing the space you're in, the colors, the textures, the smells, the sounds. Just taking a moment to be in the space you're in. When you're ready, coming back into our circle together. So, does anyone want to share a little bit about what that experience was like for them? Yeah, Theodore.
Yeah, that struck me as well when the plant's going through the bedrock, and yet the bedrock remains stable. That was really interesting. That the bedrock has its own flexibility. You know that being strong and stable doesn't mean being totally unchangeable,
Mhm.
um, and that even being permeated by roots, uh, the bedrock remains stable and foundational. And yeah, overall, I also found myself going in and out of being fully present with it,
Mhm.
and um, but there was a kind of cumulative effect of becoming more present. And
Mhm.
also the way you spoke is I also found it very helpful and kind of patient and deepening. And uh, how you opened it as well with this consideration that I guess I'd phrase it like, I'm an instance of the earth. I'm like an aspect of the earth, or simultaneously different and not different from the earth, something like that. And there's a great assurance to that's like, oh, that's like family and home and returning and normalcy, and not needing to sort all these things out myself. That there's that great multi epoch wisdom there, not just
Hmm.
life. And
Absolutely.
yeah, I find that very, like, it's not mainly about me, and I guess that's like a great relief. The more, the more of that, the better. In that
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. There's this. I want to speak a little bit about that. So, in the context of a traditional initiation into adulthood, just looking cross culturally at different indigenous initiations into adulthood, there's this moment where you really drop your family of origin baggage and you step into relationship with the earth as mother and the sky as father, or the opposite, or something else entirely. But it's this sense of feeling that parental role being taken up by your environment and the spirit world versus keeping your parents in that role. So our parents can just be regular sized, and our families can just be regular sized, and we can come back to them as equals versus as people who have to sort of treat them in some um, protocol that's outmoded because we're no longer children. And so I find that one way of beginning to feel into that possibility is forming this intimate relationship with the earth that we begin to trust over time through practice. That then in those moments where we are really jostled from our sense of stability, or we're in fear, we can choose to notice, oh, I've become uprooted, reroute down, and feel what we want to do from that place where we already have stability that's not dependent on these other people. Like, so what's authentic for us actually in this moment when we're not dependent on these people to make us stable?
Yeah, that really makes sense. I just say as well, I found some grief and love coming up together as well. That sense of, as with the reconnection, there's that sense of like, oh my God, all that time of disconnection, and still I'm disconnected to such an extent. And there's that grief and love come together as well, I find. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And the beautiful thing about this too is it's not at all a linear process. It's not like, I'm good because I'm grounded now and you're ungrounded. Like there's this way that as we move through the course of our life, naturally, we're going to need to reforge this relationship again and again, because the grounding that was sufficient when you were like a kid in high school or something is not sufficient when you are a person who's running a family or a community, or has a really stressful job. It's a different level of grounding that you need. And so the beauty of the of an animist perspective of the earth being this living being that we can look to for guidance is that we don't have to rely on some like fixed point that we get to and then come back to. We can go back and ask again and again, what do I need now? What do I need now if I'm trying to be this person now in my life? What's the new level of grounding that's necessary for this next phase of my life? And then reforge that connection.
Hmm.
And so that's
Yeah.
why I shared some of the oh, sorry, were you something, Theodore?
Well, I just said, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, thank you. Yeah. Yeah, and that's why I shared some of these questions that you can just engage in your own practice of like bringing to the bedrock, like, who am I? Where do I stand? What do I stand for? And if I'm sort of like choosing to be here now, strong and full, without apology, what arises in that moment? Like what emotions come up, what thoughts come up when I'm standing in that feeling? And that's just the bedrock. And there's other questions we can ask for the other pieces. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you. So I just want to speak a little bit about a little more about grounding. So how I think about grounding is that as people of power, that we if we believe that we have sovereignty, over ourselves, then being grounded is our choice. And so cultivating an active and functional grounding cord, from my perspective, is necessary if we're going to make the choice to be grounded, because we need a means to do so. It can't just be an intellectual choice. And so, in a sense, our grounding cord is the logical conclusion of our actions. It's like the reflection of our choices that we make throughout our day to be grounded. But this is one way we can engage that intelligence and wisdom of the earth to make that choice easier, to give us a foundation that and center that we can come back to throughout our day when just things naturally make us feel a bit uprooted, or we choose to be uprooted because of old ways we learned to survive, often when we were younger. And so, I just want to make it not seem so abstract, or like weather. Sometimes people talk about, like, I'm just not grounded today, like, versus I'm choosing not to be grounded today, and why. What's coming up that's making me make that choice. Um, when what I spoke about before of safety, when we are grounded, our body feels safe. That's part of the feeling of being grounded. Um, Now, for some of us, again, who had experiences maybe where we were in an environment where we learned to uproot our grounding to survive, it might not feel safe, because those cells will be saying, like, "What are you doing? Why are you grounding? That's not safe. It's not a good thing." And we can also, as we build the habit, and compassionately turn to them and say, "Yeah, I see you there, and I understand. I'm going to continue making this choice right now, but I also hear what you're saying and your fear." We'll talk more about that in a bit, how to be with these selves. But if we keep making that choice, um, there is a felt sense of safety in our body that will begin to cultivate, that makes it easier to be resourced to show up for these little ones who need our attention in our inner landscape, that are stuck in these old choices we made to survive. And when we're not grounded, our body feels unsafe. So for those of us who have a lot of adrenal fatigue, sometimes that can be in part impacted by the fact that we're in a constant cortisol response by not being grounded. Like, our body, the way our body tells us we are unsafe, when we feel ungrounded, is like an accurate response. And we might be like, "Why do I feel so unsafe?" And I'm like, "Because you're not grounded." And it gives us these signals of anxiety and fear that if we don't tend to, if we don't choose to make that choice to be grounded, continue to get worse. And over time, we might be diagnosed for that. I'm not saying that there's not other sources of fear and anxiety in our life that are, and I'm not saying that anxiety and fear is an invalid response, but if that's a big root thing in our life that we're struggling with, grounding can be a big piece of that energy medicine we need to begin to create change there in relationship to that. Because when we're grounded, we know that we're part of this bigger oneness, and we're safe, and to some extent, we're protected. Now, I also don't want to seem like I'm bypassing the fact that obviously our world is not always a safe place. Like, as a Black queer person, there's plenty of environments where my life and my physicality is threatened, and I am not safe just being in my body, being myself. And when I am in those spaces and I am ungrounded, I am much less safe, because then I'm not present to the possible danger that's around me, or present to, or able to respond effectively to navigate those spaces. So there still is a greater protection and safety in being fully in the body, rooted in the earth, and present to the moment. And when we're perpetually not in this space of grounding, our energy tends to move up out of our body and cycle in our head. So for those of you who like notice you start to get like Zoom fatigue, or like a headache towards the end of the day, we might think, "Oh, it's because I'm hunched over my computer all the time." But often it's actually just literally this, what you might say in like a Taoist terminology, chi, that's just gotten very stagnant, because it's cycling in the same pattern again and again in the top of your head, versus flowing and cycling through your whole body. And so taking time to do a meditation like this and breathe into the earth and begin to reforge that connection actually can make that headache go away. Now, for some of us, that's really extreme. We might need something more um, physical, like a qigong practice, like an energy practice of moving the qi in our body to get it out of that cycling. But when you feel very impatient when you start this kind of work, that's really a sign of that energy just cycling, because it's the chi. The chi, once it's in a certain pattern, doesn't want to leave that pattern. Just like our ego structure, its job is to keep the status quo. So once we start transforming, it gets upset. It's like the same on a microcosmic level with this chi spinning in our head. It wants to keep doing what it's doing. So if we start to ground, we'll feel this sense of impatience or frustration. And it's important just to turn to that voice of impatience and frustration and be compassionate with yourself. Excuse me, but then continue to make that choice to ground anyway. So yeah, I see you impatience, I see you frustration, and I'm still going to do this in this moment. And then if you feel the same way, after I finish this practice, we can talk. But for now, I'm just going to keep doing this grounding and just being. I call that like suspicion versus doubt. Like when we doubt our own experience, our whole experience kind of tends to collapse. But when we are suspicious of our experience, it opens up. It's like, isn't that interesting that when I start to ground, I feel really impatient or really frustrated or really fearful? Not needing to do anything or make a big story up about why that is, just saying, isn't that interesting? And then returning to the practice. And that's a really powerful tool, just that simple phrase of, isn't that interesting, versus thinking that because I am experiencing discomfort, I have to immediately change my behavior because of that or leap out of the discomfort in some way. The last thing I wanted to say about grounding, and then I'll stop talking for a bit, is sometimes we think of like going in nature to be grounded, and that's an important medicine that we can access. And just think of the possibility if you ground and then you approach trees, animals, plants, from that place of being grounded. How much more they have to offer us, how much more intimacy we can bring to that conversation, how much we can both grow and learn when we are coming to those incredible beings grounded versus asking them to do what is our job for us. Because fundamentally, it's our job to make that choice to be grounded. And we're consistently not making that choice. We're asking others in our life to ground us for us, whether that be humans, whether that be the plant world or, the land around us. And so this is one way, there's obviously lots of ways, this is one way we can consciously practice making that choice to be grounded and building that muscle over time. So it gets easier and easier. So that we can just do in a breath versus going through a whole long visualization. And so that brings us to another thing that's something you can explore in this visualization if you choose to replay it and listen to it again. You can also scan the sort of 16 feet below the earth, like on your grounding cord, and just notice, are there any sort of parallel, sort of horizontal things, cords, wires, strings, leaving your grounding cord? Sort of like when you put a carrot in the freezer for a long time and start seeing those little long white hairs form off of it, or sorry, in the fridge. It's like that, and that's often a sign that someone else is grounding off of your grounding cord, or you are grounding off of someone else's grounding cord potentially. And so you can just imagine taking some of that energy, maybe some like gold energy from above in my cosmology, forming it into like little scissors or knife, whatever you want to use. Just take your magical scissors or knife and just cut it off gently where it is, repair it with the silver energy, and then let it go. And if you find it keeps reforming, then you can sort of energetically speak like, don't do this anymore. Please don't connect to me in this way anymore. Or you might have to notice how is the dynamic that I'm currently in relationship with this person involving me continually choosing to let them ground off of me, and how might I begin to shift that behavior? Because these things aren't like abstract, energetic, weird things that just spontaneously form. They're, again, just the logical conclusion of our everyday choices.
At this point, a student asked whether one's energetic grounding cord should be a single root or branching out.
That's how I see it. There's nothing wrong if you find it easier to visualize that kind of organic structure of a root system, that's okay. But I sort of visualize it as one long root that just is flexible, is strong, and can move with me as I move throughout my day. So it's not dependent on me staying in one place like a tree to keep me grounded. Thank you.
At this point, a student was grateful for learning about this relationship with Mother Earth and also asked about our relationship with Father Sky.
Yes. And I wasn't going to cover that as much today because it's sort of like a whole, practice we could spend an hour on in and of itself. But yes, yeah, I don't want to go there quite yet. What I'll just say briefly is yes, how I think of the energy of the above is I think what you might call Father Sky or whatever you might call it true yang in a Taoist cosmology. You might call it, heaven energy. You might call it the celestial cosmic energy. I think of it having the quality of gold, where the other is silver in my cosmology, and it holds the energy of blessing and protection and generosity. And often there's other qualities too, like purification as well as a big part of it. But often what can happen is that our culture has so many stories about, you know, patriarchy. We live in many ways in a very patriarchal system of like wounds that we might have or abuse we might have suffered from fathers or men in our life. And in a system that says, even if we're not raised in a monotheistic religion, it's so ubiquitous in our culture, and it's so informed, even secular culture, that we still tend to think of the divine, or many of us sort of get infused in the background of our original childhood ways of thinking about the divine as having to do with inherently a male energy, inherently an energy that has specific stories about it and a lot of human baggage and static around it. And that we don't, unless we're like a priest or something, we don't have the right to direct revelation and an intimate relationship with that energy. And so in a animist or shamanic cosmology, you do. Every single person has a right to an intimate, direct relationship with that energy, and not the stories about that energy or what the religions tell us about that energy, but what all those religions point to. This great mystery. And I don't want to talk so much about that and then not actually do it experiential. So let's just also go to the above. Why not complete our central channel today, and then we'll move into the other things I wanted to talk about. It's going to be a little short of visualization. Just settle in. Just take a few deep breaths into the bowl of your pelvis where you saw that pond and begin to let it form again. A beautiful lily spirit's going to keep helping us. And so see a lotus flower on that pond, an array of light shining on that flower. It might be sun, it might be the light of the moon, the full moon, it might be the light of the stars. Whatever feels right for you energetically in this day, you can just intuitively let it form however you want it to form. But what's important is that there's light there shining on that flower. Just feel how easy it is for the flower just to open to that light, just to receive it. The lotus doesn't have any questions about if it's worthy of receiving that light, if that light is too much, or if it's too small. It just opens and receives the light. And so begin letting yourself follow that light up, keeping the connection to the silver energy beneath your feet as you move up. Almost like a geyser, letting it push you up this ray of light, up out of your body, up into the weather of the day where you are, the sky, up even higher. And begin to let all those stories you hold about the above, about the divine, about fathers, about all these energies, just let them turn into weather. Whether it's sleet or hail or rain or wind, whatever it is, just let these stories turn into weather and move through those stories. Keep going, not bypassing them, just moving through them. And just keep going up until you leave that weather and those stories behind you. Keep going up until you reach this place that you've been moving towards, whether it's the sun or the moon or a star, whatever it is, just letting yourself reach that source of this light and go through it to the light behind the light, this place of the highest power of the universe. The Dagara in West Africa might call this the thing that knowledge can't eat, that place beyond the human stories, that all the human stories point to, all the great art points to. Let yourself be there, to claim your own relationship there in this moment. Let it be easy. Feel the energy of this golden light in this place, this energy of purification, sweeping away all that you don't need in this moment that's ready to go. You're just letting it go. Feeling how in this place all is well. Everything is connected. Feeling the protection of this energy. This is the energy that gives the chameleon its ability to blend in with colors. The coyote, its cleverness and claws and teeth. The trees, their bark. The humans, their great sensitivity. Feel that energy of protection filling you. Feel the quality of blessing and beneficence, this quality of what it is to be a blessing, to feel the blessing you are as you merge with this energy. See if you can let it stretch you a little bit, to open to this energy a little more than feels comfortable maybe. Just to breathe into it. Like a really good yoga session. Just opening to this golden energy. And beginning to bring that golden light down, down, down through the weather and all those stories. Down through the atmosphere of the earth and the weather of the day that you're in. Beginning to see the place where you live. Beginning to see yourself sitting down there. And blessing yourself with this golden light, bringing it down into your crown. Letting it fill you. Breathing in the golden light into every part of you. And exhaling out all the stuff that doesn't resonate with this golden energy, letting it go into the earth where it can be recycled. Breathing in even more golden energy with the space that's opened up. and exhaling out more of the stuff that you don't need. And sending that golden energy down into the center of the earth, following it with your conscious awareness down to that silver center, its lover. Feel the joy of that golden energy meeting the silver energy. And see all the stuff that's been sort of sent out of your field and just let it blow up. Really use the imagery of blowing it up just to make that strong, energetic choice of release so the earth can take it and it can become something new versus what we stuck it in our bodies. And then feeling the silver energy spiraling up through you, through your body, back to that highest power of the universe. And just resting your awareness in your body, feeling these two great lovers, the above and the below, mixing and merging inside of you, in each and every cell, forming the perfect combination that you need for this day. And feeling how each moment is an opportunity for you to move as an expression of their love. And when you're ready, opening your eyes and coming back into this space. Welcome back, everyone. Thank you for going on that second journey with me. Okay, so those two energies, I don't want to go in quite as in depth with the above today, but those two energies together form what you might call the central channel. This energy of the above and the below moving through us that helps us to form and have a sense of our center that we can hold throughout our day. And so what I'd like to move into now is talking about what do we do with the voices, the feelings, the fears that come up as we engage these practices? Because sometimes they can feel really great and sometimes they can feel really terrible. And both of those are fine responses. Doesn't mean you're wrong if you were like, wow, I can't believe everyone's saying that was so wonderful. That was horrible for me. Like that's okay. That can be part of it too. And so um, the first thing I just want to talk about, what does presence mean and how do we get present with others and with ourselves? And I think to get present with others, it starts with being present to ourselves, for me at least. And so the first step I want to share is something called self in presence or compassionate presence. Um, my teachings, we talk a lot about the authentic self, but I think sometimes it can start to feel like this big thing that's hugely outside of ourself. But really, what the authentic self is the combination of our divinity, so like the part of us that is deeply connected to those energies of the above, and our humanity, that part of us that's deeply connected to the energies of the earth. And those two energies come together in this authentic self that can hold both of them and bring them into the world, the body and the soul, in harmony, in coherent unity, moving our purpose into the world. That's how I think of the authentic self. And so, stepping into our authenticity is a muscle that we can build. Our authentic self isn't something we have to like go on a journey to find or like, go to some other country to experience. It's like it's right here all the time. And all of life, from an animist perspective, is constantly trying to remind us of that unique essence we came here to be, that authentic self that we are. And so sometimes how that can manifest is discomfort, because if our life is constantly trying to remind us of who we are, and as we talked about before, we have some selves that are stuck in these moments where we made a choice out of fear to survive that was not in alignment with our authenticity, then sometimes life trying to remind us who we are looks like reminding us of these selves that are stuck in these moments of fear. And so that's how I think about triggers. I think about triggers as our body and our soul conspiring to show us these selves that are stuck in these stories we created, essentially, that we still carry in our body about moments we made a choice out of fear to survive that wasn't in alignment with who we are. And I'm not saying those choices are bad because they got us here. We're still living. So they're great. Like, honor those choices because they got us here. And we don't want to still stay stuck in them as we're no longer in those situations that we were at that time that we made those choices. And now we are adults. Whereas many of these choices were made when we're children, and we actually are dependent on the adults in our lives for our survival. So it's a very different space to make that choice in than as an adult who is now not dependent on older adults in our life for our survival necessarily. So all that is to say, like, what's the first step of stepping back into our authenticity when we feel stuck or identified with one of these experiences? And the first step for me is compassionate curiosity. So compassionate curiosity is more of an experiential feeling than an intellectual concept. So I'm just going to guide you, and it's not going to be nearly as intense as the other two in visualization, but if you'll humor me, we're just going to do a very quick dropping in to compassion and curiosity just to get a feeling in our body of that energy. You can just briefly close your eyes, take one deep grounding breath, and just imagine yourself in a forest where there is a clearing in that forest, and you just come out at the edge of this clearing, like your head's just popping out of the edge of the clearing, and you see on the other side of the clearing this small deer, and it looks right at you, it sees you. What do you do in that moment to help encourage that deer to approach you, to help that deer know that you are safe to approach? So, what body language do you use? What emotions are you holding in your heart? Are there any sounds you make? Just notice. And let that dissolve a bit. Just breathe in and out and let that image dissolve. And then find yourself in a guidance counselor's office. You're the guidance counselor. And kind of angry parent brings their child in and leaves them with you. And you gently ask the parent to leave, and they do. And then this child is sitting across from you. And their arms are crossed. They're slumped over. They're not really making eye contact with you. Again, what body language do you use? What words do you use? What gestures do you make to help that child know it's safe for them to share with you what's going on? And so now come back. Just let that space dissolve. Deep breath in and out. And come back to our circle together. All of these are qualities that I would describe of self and presence, of this curious compassion, this sense of this willingness to get on the level of what you're engaging with, to not try to change it, to be quiet, to listen, to be open, to be inviting, versus coming and thinking, I know what you need, or I know how this needs to be, or I know how this needs to go. That's the quality of self and presence as I define it. That's a quality, how we know when we're in our authentic self, when we're in the big self who can be present with anything that arises in our inner landscape. It has this quality to it. And so for most of us, that's not how we generally treat ourselves throughout our day. We tend to like control or judge or dominate or victimize or belittle or shame or cut down or guilt. There's all these different ways we talk to ourselves. There are not any of these qualities we use. And often that's what keeps that kind of approach keeps these little selves stuck in their same patterns. But when we can get on their level and listen to them, invite them to share with us their experience versus dictating what their experience should be, and be curious with them and slow with them and be in the pauses and the inarticulateness of the words as they come, that's when things begin to shift and change in our inner landscape. And so that to me is how I define presence, that ability to do that first and foremost with ourselves, and then eventually with others as well when that's appropriate. Now, another piece of this is that we need relationship for this process to function. So, how I define relationship is distance plus connection. You're not going to if you want to smell soup, you're not going to slam your face in it. And you're also not going to stand on the other side of the room. You're going to hover over it and waft a bit. So we want to learn to be in that wafting experience with our own inner experience, to come close to something we find inside of us and not instantly merge and identify with it. Like, I'm so upset or I'm so angry, and also not exile it and push it away, but to come into this sort of dynamic tension where we feel our current time self and we feel this other being inside of us, this version of us that has something they're feeling or wanting to share with us. And we can hold both. We can hold our awareness as our current time self. We can also hold their experience and listen to what they're wanting to share. And often just that listening is enough to begin to create change without even having to do anything, because it's been so long since we've actually seen this self as they are versus we think they should be, or we want them to be, or how we think we need to fix them, you know. Um, the third component, so I've shared this component of compassionate presence, and then I shared a relationship. The third component that's necessary when we're engaging these inner selves is um, describing versus labeling. And all of this is going to what not wanting to get stuck in the mind and engaging the heart's wisdom. That the mind isn't good at doing these things, that we're talking about. So the describing versus labeling is a way we can engage the mind in tracking the heart's wisdom versus the mind running the show. So if I pick up this glass next to me, and you can do this yourself with an object, rather than saying it's a glass, I'm saying, oh, there's a hard quality to it. There's a coolness in my hands as I hold it. It's hollow in the center. And if I reach down far enough, there's a wetness there. It's narrower at the base and wider at the top slightly. There's sort of ripples I feel in its structure, and it's very smooth texture. These are the qualities of describing versus being like, this is a glass, or that's my issues with my dad, or that's my stuff with my ex, or all the those are ways that we move into our analytical mind and compartmentalize our inner experience so it can't shift and change. When we're willing to bring our awareness of all of our senses and just describe what we're experiencing as it is, then things start to move. And as we describe what's there, we might notice we're identified with something inside of us. So, like, let's say there's this part of me as I'm feeling into my belly that's chosen to uproot my grounding because it's really ashamed of my body and how I look right now. And it feels like that it learned how we escape the feeling of shame is just to uproot our grounding and kind of disassociate. And there's another part of me that really doesn't want to even say that to you because it's like embarrassing and it's like and I should be ashamed of how I feel and how my body looks right now. And so it's dangerous to even engage with this part that's feeling that shame because you need to keep that part feeling shame. You need to control it that way. And so that if I notice, oh, this is not the big me, because that me has a lot of feelings about this other part that are not curiosity and compassion. So now I'm inviting forward that other self too. There's this me that feels this shame, and there's this me that wants to control that other me by keeping it feeling that shame and is afraid of it not feeling the shame. And they're both there now. And now I'm back in the big me who can be compassionate and curious with all of it because I've taken the time to acknowledge that other self that was holding those other feelings. And then from there, I can feel into which needs my attention most in this moment and just begin to engage in dialogue with it. And so what I'm sharing here is a lot. I know it's a lot, and it's just a tip of a much larger process, obviously, of self inquiry that we can engage and tools for that inquiry process. But I just wanted to give you that initial trifecta of those three skills of the compassionate curiosity, of the relationship, and the describing versus labeling that helps us to begin to create change as we move into our inner landscape and navigate there. Um, the other thing I'll say about the relationship piece is most of us tend to be either someone who exiles our emotions, like what I might call a distant processor, or exiles our inner experience, or someone who identifies with our inner experience. Both of those are ways of keeping us out of presence. They're just different ways of not being present. So, for those of us who are what you might call close processors, it's like the minute we touch into our inner landscape, we're like, this is too intense. I'm like crying or I'm feeling this. Like, so everything happens all at once. It's really intense. Then we can't really be in our process because there's too much intensity. If we're the other person who's a more distant processor, then when we touch in, we're like, I don't even know if I'm feeling anything. I don't even know if anything's here. I think I'm just making all this up. Like, I don't know. Like, it just feels numb. There's nothing. It's empty. And so these are the two kind of spectrums. And we can be on, different parts of that spectrum and we can find different spaces in our life where we tend to be one or the other. Like maybe in the field of intimate relationship, I'm very much a close processor, but then when I get more to my work life, I more feel like a distant processor. It just depends. But most of us tend to fall in one of those two categories. So for the people who are distant processors, what I encourage you to do is slow down, speak out loud what you're noticing, maybe even draw pictures about it. Really, you need to work on closing that gap to form relationship, coming closer to your inner experience after you've been used to exiling it. And so that just takes time and a willingness to be with what feels subtle, what you're not even sure is anything, but give voice to it anyway. And then take what you're giving voice to back to the felt sense in your body and describe it and see how your body responds to the words that you're using. Is it opening? Is it closing? That's for the distant processor. For the close processor, it's similar, but you need to get disidentified. So you need to create more space to be able to form relationship. So that could be saying hello. Like instead of saying, I'm just feel so angry, I want to kill that person. I'm noticing there's something in my belly that feels so angry, it just wants to kill that person. And I'm moving into that place in my inner landscape and I'm saying hello to that self. Just that act of saying hello. And then I'm noticing, how does the self respond to me saying hello to it? Does it want me to get away? Is it excited to finally be heard? Like, how is it responding in this moment? And then you can move from there. But that basic act of forming relationship, whether you're identified or exiled, is the first step to then being able to continue with that compassion and curiosity and describing of what's arising in your symbolic language. Yeah, and so one of the reasons I wanted to start with the grounding piece is because when we're in that place of difficulty moving back into compassion and curiosity, it can help if we have through practice cultivated that resource of grounding to step back into. And we can say, oh, okay, I'm going to take a moment to take a breath. I'm going to feel that connection to the earth that I've been cultivating in my practice when I'm not in a state of upset. And then I'm going to move inward and see what's there. Um, Now, what we do with these inner selves is a much bigger topic. And we're not going to go move completely into that today because we're going to close soon in about 10 minutes or so. But what I'll say for now is that it's important to realize that all of these inner selves are in our inner landscape because it serves us for them to be there. So every single one of them thinks they need to be there for us to survive. And we, as the current time self adult now, are the ones who are keeping them marginalized in the role that they're in because they benefit us being marginalized in that way in some way. Like, the self who learned as a child to survive that if I share my voice, I'll be crushed. We benefit by that child self staying in that pain of that moment by now no longer having to use our voice. Like that could be just one example. It's not that these are necessarily conscious choices we're making every day, or that because I'm using the word choice, I'm saying I'm like sort of like victim blaming or something. Obviously, these were choices that were made that we made to survive in a moment, and we don't necessarily have the skills yet to uncover and reclaim. But if we can remember our sovereignty and our ability to move into that place inside of us and show up for these selves that are stuck in these moments, and we can feel into with our curiosity, what were they needing in that moment they didn't get from the adults in their life at that time? What were they needing in that moment that would have made it safe to feel they could use their voice? And then we, as the adult now, can show up for them and relieve them from the burden of having to stay in that function they learned to survive, the way they learned to keep us safe. And so, that's sort of the heart of a lot of the work I do, which involves not just how we show up for these younger selves. That's a lot of where these experiences are coming from our childhood, but also how do we show up for anything we're encountering in our inner landscape, any type of story or belief or sort of environmental pattern in a certain place in our inner landscape. Um, and then beyond that, as you get into the more spirit-led parts of the work, ancestral issues, or um, other types of patterning that's not solely held in our own inner landscape. And so today, though, I just want you to come away with a sense that of this tool you can use to connect to the above and the below, to remember your own center, and then sourcing from that place of sovereignty that arises from the connection to the earth and the above and your right to be here and take up space as a human being on this planet, knowing that with that sovereignty, you can show up for these many inner selves in a way that helps them feel safe to unchoose the choices they made and come back into the fullness of who you are now as your adult self, back into the living process that you are. And each time we do that, we learn a little more about that unique essence that we are meant to be here. And we don't need to have like a neat, simple phrase for our purpose or our unique essence. It's like it's never been seen before. It's probably very hard to put into language. Sometimes I've gotten like snatches of words that describe my purpose, but I know it's bigger than any of those phrases. And so what's important to remember is we keep that life is always trying, from a shamanic perspective, to remind us of that essence that we are. And so, if we can stay in our bodies and stay present to what life is sharing with us, then the vision's not going to be somewhere we have to seek it out. It's right here being handed to us all the time. We just have to get out of our own way and receive it. And so, one way of getting out of our own way that doesn't require a lot of energy, doesn't require a lot of like efforting and doing, this sort of way of magnetizing our energy back to ourselves. It's just being willing to move into our inner landscape with this curiosity and compassion and show up with that love and that care for ourselves, and trust that the more that we can do that, the better we can then share the love that we are with our community, with our family, with our friends, because all acts of violence in a sense originate from that inner violence with our inner selves, the inner ways we dominate and control that we then project onto others and feel we have to enact outside of us as well. And so, the more, to me, what excites me about this kind of work is the more that we can actually change the stories we hold inside of us, like really change them, not to change our relationship with them, but change them entirely. The more that we can divest from the stories that keep us complicit with these big systems of harm that we're all entangled in, and the more we can begin to invest our energy in creating something that's different. All right, so I want to close with just a last experiential exercise with this, and then we'll move into the last 10 minutes that I think Leah will be leading. So let's just wander inside one last time together in this particular configuration of humans. Just take a breath into your head. And into your heart center. And into your belly. And just feel into if you can move into the inner landscape of your heart. Just let yourself settle there in your heart. And feel into if you can send an invitation into your body, almost like sending a whale song down into your depths. If your body was an ocean. Who in me keeps me out of relationship with the earth? Like, who in me marginalizes my relationship with the earth? And it's not an intellectual question. Just let your body respond. It might respond with an image or a physical sensation or a word. And just notice what comes. And just see if you can move towards whatever comes, wherever you feel it in your body. It might be in your root, it might be in your belly, solar plexus, somewhere else. Just notice where you feel that energy. And just try to bring that curiosity there in your inner landscape, that compassion. And just describe what you feel or sense or see there. And notice the feeling has an age to it. If you can invite forward a certain age self, if you don't already see a self, or if it's something else that's coming into your awareness. Whatever you find, just say hello. Just greet it, welcome it. And just notice how it responds to your welcome. And sense into what this self is wanting or needing from you in this moment. Just let it know you really hear it. You hear what it's wanting. You also might ask what it's not wanting, what it's afraid of. Just listen. And see if in this moment there's anything that this self is wanting you to do for it right now. Actions communicate much better than words. Just notice how it responds to whatever action you take. And thank this self for coming into your awareness. Let it know you will return. And thank your body and its processes. We thank the earth below and the sky above, and the heart that unites us all. Just taking a deep breath of rich brown, neutral earth energy, filling yourself up to your head and out to your toes. And beginning to come back into the space. And just know that you can continue to dialogue to be with whatever emerged for you. So thank you so much, everyone. I really appreciated spending this time with you and hearing your thoughts and questions and experiences.
Thank you, Langston. That was I feel very grounded. Grounded, I feel very connected. I feel like you opened some new channels of understanding and wonder and connected a couple of dots. And I just love that. I really just appreciate you think you know something and then someone comes in with a whole new perspective and you're like thank you. Thank you everyone for your presence and for your depth of exploration. And thank you, Langston, for just really bringing so much expanding what we're doing, you know, into the body and outside of ourselves. And I think that's really staying with me is a piece that you talked about, the role of initiation and how we put down the stories about our parents and we re-engage the earth as our parent, and we'd have a new way of being sovereign and a new way of being in relationship to our parents. And I so appreciate that, because our next storytelling class is all about wisdom stories, and I feel like that line that you just said just brought a whole new layer of the medicine of that process. So I'm really grateful for that. And for you, how can we, or is there anything that you do? Can we support you? Like, how can we throw some more sunshine in your direction?
Thank you. Yeah, it was just wonderful to be with all of you. This is a lot of sunshine right here. But you're welcome to. You can find more out about me on my website, langstonkahn.com. I work with people one on one. I also lead classes, mostly through the Last Math Center for Shamanic Healing, which are also, advertised on my website. Um, Beyond that, right now, you're welcome to, if you want to like follow my updates on Instagram and venture into that strange social media world. I am there. I'm not super active right now, but I usually share like events I'm doing there, and I also have a mailing list. Um, but beyond that, for now, that's pretty much it. There's a lot of classes that'll be announcing later in the year, but for now, I'm sort of in the middle of teaching one of my main classes through the Last Math Center, Energy Body Mastery. Um, and we teach that every year. So if you are interested in like diving deeper into this particular work we covered here, one way to do that is just signing up for that, mailing list or waiting list in that course, which you can find through my website.
Thank you, thank you, thank you.